Hi, my name is Katherine, obsessive compulsive emotional overeater. I'm abstinent today because I weigh and measure. Oh, guys, I'm already gonna start crying. This is so silly. I'm so sorry. Okay, I get emotional. Um, I'm abstinent today because I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the delicious and abundant gray sheet. I write them down, commit them to my loving sponsor. Do not eat in between no matter what, and eat my meals no matter what. My date of abstinence is April 10th, 2023, and that means I am over 9 months sober from overeating or grazing today. Um, Kind of how things started for me. I grew up in a very loving and very enmeshed, very close family, but they were also quite obsessed with people's weight and people's and just food. Like food was a huge source of joy and kind of how we expressed love. And my father always talked about what amazing cook my mother was. And both my mother and father were quite a bit overweight already by the time I was old enough to notice anything. My dad was always he was chubby as a little boy, and kind of grew out of it for a minute then, but he was also an opera singer, and he was a bass. And so he kind of always had the excuse that because he was a bass and he had to produce those big, deep sounds. I remember growing up and always hearing that he had once, tried to be skinny and had lost all this weight. And then his voice had left him. And so and also I just remember, like, we'd be driving up and down streets, and if he'd see a lady that was really overweight, he'd always say, "Oh, you see that poor lady," and bless her heart. Like, it was just always, weight was always talked about. And I remember being on my first kind of family diet when I was probably 5 or 6. And so for me, growing up, it always felt like I had been such a good girl, especially in my teenage years. Then if I had not eaten, or if I'd hardly eaten anything that day, then that was like being, good, and almost like treating myself well and being healthy and sporty. And, it was just strange how my mind suddenly thought, well, if I can take in the least amount of food, then that should always be my goal, kind of thing. And then I'd always be frustrated with myself when I couldn't do that. And yeah, and then it just started that I noticed I was medicating with food a lot. This was, in my early 20s, that, like, if I was sad, I would eat. If I was happy, you'd celebrate with food. If I was bored, I would eat. If I was really sad, I wouldn't eat. Well, if I was really sad, usually I'd still eat. If I was really happy, then I wouldn't eat. Then I'd maybe not eat for 36 hours or whatever. And so it was just an incredibly emotional topic all the time. I was um, first, when I was little, I was kind of a very fragile, thin little girl. But then quickly, like first grade, I became quite chubby, and I was teased a lot for it. But I also, kind of was loved so much by my parents and told I was beautiful every single day that, it's kind of this weird, I felt like I was two people in one. But, and my parents did try to actually always have healthy food. Sweets were actually never really allowed in the home, and still it was always just this topic. And I grew up doing ballet. We tried to be active, and still it was just always that I felt I wasn't. And of course, this started then more when I was more kind of cognizant, and when I was older, I just realized I wasn't a friend to my body, and my body was just always. I was always at war. We were enemies. We were always enemies. I never looked the way I wanted to. I was very ashamed of my naked body. I remember early on with 16 or 17 thinking, like, oh, if I ever get married and I have to get naked in front of somebody, like, I can be pretty with clothes on, but without clothes on, I'm disgusting. That's how I felt. And this was even when I had lost kind of my chubby weight again. And so I also noticed that I had a very distorted view of myself and of my body. But ultimately it came from being at war at my body all the time. And that was something that was such a great sadness to me and such a nuisance. I was just so annoyed with my body that it wouldn't do what I wanted it to do, and that it always have these cravings that I didn't want it to have. And then I'd give in to the cravings, and then I'd feel so much shame and be angry about it. Now, I was never a huge binger. I don't come from huge numbers. I just had kind of, it was almost like this, like that torture method that they use where they just drip one drop of water on you. That's what it felt like. Just a constant um, hopelessness, a constant anger, a constant, like I said, just battle and warring with my body. And I come from a strong faith. And so I knew a body is incredible blessing to have from our higher power. And so then there would be double shame on top of that. I'd hate myself for hating my body. It just was this hamster wheel that I'd be in. And 20 years ago, my sister, when I was living in Chicago, my sister moved to Chicago, and she actually found GreySheet. Before that, she was in Overeaters Anonymous, and we had tried as a family every single diet. We did the, cabbage soup diet. We did you only do the pineapple. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say foods right now, but all the different diets. I was fully raw vegan. I was fully, doing only the keto. I mean, just every single diet out there. I had tried at some point or another. And then my sister, had found GreySheet, and then that worked for her. And our entire family was very supportive. But we, of course, we know her as having a very strong will. And so we just thought, oh, well, only Lizzie can do something like that. And so we just thought, I watched what she did, but I never thought I could do it. And 20 years later, she was here in about 2 years ago. She was here in Germany visiting, because I live in Munich, Germany, and she lives in Chicago. And she said, well, why don't you just try this as a diet? And I know that's not necessarily what we maybe say to do or recommend, but she just stood with me at the stove and in my kitchen. And this was such a blessing. She went to go shopping first, showed me all the things that are kind of like, oh, this is great on GreySheet, and this is great, and this is great. And I remember always, when I looked at her food, I always loved her food. I always wanted to eat what she was eating, but I just didn't have the time. Nobody was cutting all the veggies for me and everything. But I'd always say to her, oh, I wish I could just go to a restaurant and they'd make exactly what you make. But so anyhow, so she went shopping with me, showed me all the ins and outs. And then she was like, we're just going to cook. We're going to cook enough for a week. And then you're just going to, and she showed me how to package it up and, do an 8-ounce, veggie here, a 16-ounce bag of veggie there, things like that. And then I just started, and immediately I noticed all this chatter that I'd always had in my head, and all the shame and like, just that warring with food and warring with my body, and just not understanding why my husband could see a picture of some fast food and not immediately want it, or just could stop eating, even when his tummy wasn't, overstretched, but just had a feeling of fullness that I never seemed to really understand. And all of that chatter and all of those questions, and like, just thinking, I don't get it, or how can I trick myself? What's the next thing that I can do that I found on YouTube or something? It just went away. It was just quiet in my mind and so peaceful. And this is when I didn't even have a sponsor yet. And I just thought, oh gosh, this is amazing. And then I never felt like I could say I was a food addict, though. And so I didn't understand. I didn't know if I could enter the program without knowing that, I was going to eat myself into a grave if I don't, get into GreySheet and everything. And so I talked to another fellow GreySheeter from Germany, and she just said this beautiful thing. And she said, when I was first wondering to join, somebody wonderful from France told me, well, if GreySheet finds you, then it's probably something you can use. And I do think that is so true, because what we do is hard, and not a lot of us do it. And not a lot of us, in the world maybe need it. And even if we do need it, not a lot of us are willing to make the sacrifices. And I have 3 children. I have a 9-year-old boy, and after, I would always have wonderful pregnancies and then like pretty easy births, and then I'd lose weight right away, and people would say, oh, you look like you did in the beginning, like for 2 weeks, and then suddenly weight would just pile on. And I don't know why still really, but I did notice that sense of not being able to feel when I was full, when I was satiated, almost got worse. Like I would just have to eat, eat 2-3 plates of things. And then if I felt my tummy very stretched, then I thought, oh, I guess now I'm full. And again, that was that thing that I finally then realized, like, oh, maybe that's not, maybe other people just feel satiated. Maybe they don't have to feel kind of ill or uncomfortable. Sorry, my alarms. Uncomfortable before they know that they're full.
That's 10 minutes. You've got 5 minutes left.
Thank you so much. And so after that conversation with the German fellow GreySheeter, I'd gone to one German GreySheet meeting online, and that was wonderful. And I just thought, you know what, I think she's right. And I just realized, just kind of back to the sacrifices that we choose to make or not make. For me, I didn't want food to be the greatest source of my joy in life anymore. I was so tired of that. I wanted, and I'm a people person, I just wanted my connections, and especially the health that I could live with my children, to be my greatest joy in life. And because of my parents, who I love so much, and they were so wonderful and so much fun, but they were never able to really be active with me. And for me to now have little children and see how much they just love just running or climbing, they just want to be active and their bodies want to move. And I want to be able to do that with them for a long time. And to see that my parents couldn't hardly do any of that with my children. For me as a grandmother, I just want to be able to do that. And sometimes I think, oh, I won't be a roly-poly grandma if I stay on GreySheet, God willing. But I'd rather trade that. I trade that for being able to actually, not be ill, but come to their events and just live life. And as we say in GreySheet, we eat our 3 meals a day, and then we live life in between. And I was just a grazer, and there wasn't much life, and there wasn't much cleaning, and there wasn't much organizing. And I could never understand why. Why could I not have my kitchen clean every day? And why couldn't I understand better how to organize my time? And now I realize it's because I kept going to the cupboard and getting something out to put in my mouth. And there was just no end and beginning to anything. And now my meals have a beginning and have an end. And I'm so grateful for that, because then I get up and then I do other things, and I live life, and I make my home a home that's nice to live in, even though it's far from where I'd like it to be. But I feel like I can be such a much better mother and a much better wife and a much better homemaker because of all of this. And even my little, jobs that I have here and there, I can be much more focused on them. And one experience that I want to share, because I think it might be kind of unique in the sense that, again, we talk about not eating in between our meals, but I think it's just important that we know we eat our meals. And that was something that was really big for me at the very beginning, where I was just in maybe 5 days or something like that with a sponsor, and I had an altercation. It wasn't really an altercation. It was just kind of a stressful conversation with my oldest sister. And this showed me again how emotional food used to be for me. I just had a conversation that was uncomfortable, and I felt I could not eat. And so I called my sister, who's been on GreySheet, thank heavens, for 20 years. And I said, I can't eat my dinner tonight, Lizzie. I feel so nauseous. Thank you. Thank you. And she said, don't you worry. When it's time for you to eat dinner, I'll call you and I'll stay on the phone with you. Sorry, I get so emotional. And that was such a blessing for my life, to notice that that's all it takes sometimes. You just need to make a call. And so that's maybe one of the tools that I'll mention real quick, like have somebody show you how to shop if you don't know yet. Make calls when you feel like you have to eat or you can't eat. Our kind of addicts or obsessive compulsive brain wants to tell us that eating or not eating is always the solution, and it never is. Food is nourishment for our body, and that's it. And it starts and it ends. And then we move on to doing everything else that our soul and our body need. And so that's why in my mantra, I always say I eat my meals no matter what, because that has proven to be what my ego likes to catch me in. I try, make your food yummy. ask people for recipes, ask people for tips and tricks for their containers. What do they like to use? Which restaurants do they like to go to? What makes it easy? I have one friend that was in GreySheet, and she left again, and that might be the right path in a sense for her, but I can see that the reasons she entered and the reasons she left were ego. And I'm so grateful that the 12-step program really shows us our ego, like pulls the veil from our eyes. And that's why I have a rigorously positive attitude towards GreySheet, because I'm not willing to give up quality of life anymore.
Fine, Katherine.
Thank you. Just for a piece of something sweet that I've eaten 100 times. So I'd rather give that up and instead have the sweetness of life and the freedom of a peaceful mind about food. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks so much.